Hi and welcome. In this video, we are going to talk about the early history of what is now Great Britain. This is not intended to be an in-depth university level lecture. It is more of a general overview to help those of you studying for the Life in the UK test. It is not intended to be a replacement for the handbook that you have for the Life in the UK test. It's more of an addition to that, in case having someone telling you about it is easier than reading it. You should still refer to the handbook for your test. This is the 11th in a series of short videos covering different times in British history. If you missed the others, you may wish to watch those first, starting with the Stone Age. But if you're ready, let's find out about the Wars of the Roses. First of all, let's look at some of the difficult words you will hear. A breakdown is a mental illness. Allies are people who are on your side or people who support you. To maintain means to keep. Former means previous or from an earlier time. Exile is when you are not allowed to live in your own country anymore. Rumours are stories that are believed to be true, but for which there is no proof. Try to match the definition and the word. And here come the answers. Listen to the story of the Wars of the Roses and try to answer the questions. In 1453, Henry VI had a mental breakdown, and Richard, Duke of York, began to govern in his name. However, because the prospects for Henry did not look good, he began making moves to establish himself as the successor to the throne. This did not go down well with Henry's wife. There followed a civil war which lasted on and off for 30 years. On the one side, the House of York was Richard and his allies. On the other, the House of Lancaster was Henry's wife Margaret and her allies. The symbol of the House of York was a white rose, and the symbol of the House of Lancaster was a red rose, and this is why this war has come to be known as the Wars of the Roses. The battles went first one way and then the other, with nobody maintaining power for more than a few weeks. Richard of York died in one of the battles, but finally his son Edward was crowned Edward IV. Henry VI fled the country with his wife and son and was later captured and imprisoned. Except that this wasn't actually the end. Edward upset the court with his choice of wife, and two of his most powerful former allies turned against him and switched their support to Henry VI. Edward was forced to leave the country, and Henry VI was released from captivity to retake his throne. But that wasn't the end either. Edward IV returned from exile, had Henry VI quietly murdered, and reclaimed the throne himself. Henry VI's only son had been killed in battle, and Edward IV had an heir, and so it seemed the throne was secured, that the House of York had won, and that the story was over. Except that this wasn't the end either. When Edward died, his son became Edward V at the age of 12. He didn't rule for very long, only a few weeks in fact. His uncle, another Richard, had him imprisoned in the Tower of London and seized the throne for himself. Edward V and his younger brother are known today as the Princes in the Tower, and they were never seen again. But even this wasn't the end of the story. Rumours began to circulate that Richard III had murdered his nephews, and nobody really wanted a child killer as king. There was one more possible contender for the throne. He was the head of the House of Lancaster. He had been living in exile in France, and his name was Henry. Henry Tudor returned to England, and on the 22nd of August 1485, he defeated Richard III at the Battle of Bosworth Field. In January 1486, he married Elizabeth of York, the eldest daughter of Edward IV, uniting the houses of Lancaster and York. And so at last, the story was over. The end. Well, that was complicated. So let's just recap on the main points. Richard, Duke of York, tried to steal Henry VI's crown. The Wars of the Roses lasted for 30 years. The wars were between the houses of York and Lancaster. Richard's son was crowned Edward IV, and Henry VI was exiled. Edward's supporters turned against him. Henry VI took the crown back, and Edward IV was exiled. Edward IV returned, had Henry VI murdered, and took the crown back. When Edward V came to the throne, his uncle had him imprisoned and probably murdered. Edward V and his brother are today known as the Princes in the Tower. The uncle was crowned Richard III. Henry Tudor defeated Richard III at the Battle of Bosworth Field. Henry Tudor was crowned Henry VII, and he married Edward IV's daughter. I hope you found that useful. You may wish to listen again, but if you feel confident, look out for the next video where we will begin talking about the Tudors. I look forward to welcoming you back very soon.